in honour of the Holy Spirit, we're going to address what the Bible teaches about the Holy Spirit in the book of Thessalonians. We've been looking at 1 Thessalonians over the last few weeks, and we're going to look at just one or two verses that raise the work of the Holy Spirit, because it's Pentecost Sunday. That's why we've chosen to do that. And I'd like to introduce what Paul has to say by putting it in context, because so often, particularly in Western countries and in Western churches, we tend to individualise very much, what is happening in our own life as if we're still the centre of the universe, and we forget that the world is God's, and the great work that is going on at the present time is not what we do or what Windsor Road does, but what God is doing. God is the great missionary. God has a mission. God is active in the world. And it's a matter of bringing our world, our life, into the world of God and what God is doing. It's a matter of adjusting our life and our activity and our work to the work of God. God is on centre stage. God is the one who is on the move. And I want to illustrate that by putting it in the biblical context that the work of the Holy Spirit is the sign of the great new age as far as God's concerned. There was a man called William Blake in about the 1800s who said that the world is going to experience a new age of scientific discovery, of artistic development. It will be a whole new era like we've never had before. And that led to certain ways of thinking and thought, but it wasn't until about the 1970s or 80s that people started to talk about a New Age movement. Some of you may have come across it. I certainly did in my workplace. They used to talk about a New Age spirituality. It was an alternative spirituality to traditional religion. There was all these traditional religions of which Christianity was a part, and they were seen as old-fashioned, have had their time, have had their place, but now a New Age spirituality is dawning and is upon us. And it led to all sorts of practices such as channeling, crystals, astral projection, all sorts of things, meditation, eco-friendly living. This was sort of the New Age. Well, it's fizzled, it's sort of gone, and like all fads, it's passed away. And in effect, what surprised me and fascinated me about the New Age movement, and particularly when Christians were responding to it, when church leaders were writing books about the New Age movement, is that very few Christians were realising Christianity is New Age. William Blake was, centuries and centuries too late. Paul was already talking about New Age spirituality soon after Jesus had died, risen and ascended. He was the one who actually introduced the concept, this is a new age, and Christians are new age people. They are the movement of the new age. But what was shocking and surprising was that many church leaders weren't saying that. They were saying, the new age movement is just paganism revisited. It's just, a new form of paganism. But none of them were saying, hey, we are the new age people. The church is the new age. Why? Because the church was old-fashioned. The church was traditional. The church had married itself to the status quo. It was no longer challenging anything. It wasn't radical movement. It was no longer a movement of people who were saying, we are an indication that God is doing a completely new work, radically transforming this world. No, Christians have become very settled, compromising, traditional people who supported existing social structures, who supported the cultures of their place, never challenged. And we've lost sight of that. I mean, do you have a sense that you are a part of an exciting new movement, a new age movement? Do you? Well, according to Paul, you should. As a Christian, you should be saying to people, I'm part of the new era. Just watch us if you want to see what God's going to do to this world, to transform this world. That's what Paul was saying. Christians are New Age people, and through Christians, God is doing something in this world to radically transform this world. We are the new humanity being prepared for a whole new world order. And everything has to be different. So if your Christian life and your church life is dull and boring and not exciting, you've really missed the point. You really have missed the point. You're not getting it. And if you are resisting change, which most churches do and most Christians do, they're quite settled and don't want to change. They don't want a little bit of change. But as far as God's concerned, you are to be radically, totally transformed and exhibiting to people that this world is going to be radically and transformed. There's going to be a whole new order, and you are the first fruits of it. You are the exhibition of this new order. You are to be displaying to people what the world will be like, what it will become when God reigns and God rules. That's the new age. And then Paul was saying that the gift of the Spirit is the real sign, is the big sign of the new age. If people have the Spirit of God in them, they are citizens of this new world order. So when we come to looking at 1 Thessalonians, and Paul talks about the fact that they received the gospel with power, with the Holy Spirit, with full assurance, that's just not a throwaway line. That's just not standard classic Trinitarian doctrine teaching about God being three. He's really saying this is an exciting time. Thessalonians, you are part of an exciting movement of God. This was predicted long ago. Ezekiel said that there would come a time when God would give His Spirit. It says it in Ezekiel 36 verse 27. God would give His Spirit and people will know God. They won't have to be told about God. Why? Because they will intuitively know who God is. Within them, there will be somebody explaining and expounding and teaching them and telling them this is who God is. And they will sort of know it from inside. It won't have to be imposed upon them. It won't have to be beaten into them. They will know because the Spirit of God will be given to them. The Spirit of God will connect them to God. And so Paul saw that what was happening amongst the Thessalonians was this age had come. What Ezekiel predicted had appeared. He said the same thing to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 6 to 12. In that passage, and it's there, I think, in your handout, in the insert or in the newsletter, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 6 to 12, what Paul says is that people who are Christians are part of this new age and they're not part of the old age because they have received the Spirit of God. And he says this, we do, however, that's the apostles, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age or the wisdom of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we speak of God's secret wisdom, a wisdom that has been hidden and that God has destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. However, as it is written, no eye has seen, nor ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love Him. But God has revealed it to us by His Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man, except the man's spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God, except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us. There's a lot there. What's Paul trying to say? He's writing to Corinthians. These are new Christians at Corinth. And they had received the gospel. They had understood who Jesus was. And they realized that in Jesus, God was working. God was bringing salvation to the world. That Jesus' death and His resurrection were significant events. And they felt very proud that they had this new knowledge. They were starting to feel, hey, we're a cut above everyone else because we know something. We know who Jesus really was. And we know the significance, the meaning of His death, which makes us superior to other people. But Paul then